Hello. Do you like my jacket? So I've been trying to come up with some way to do something just like get a little outside of my comfort zone, make something different than what I usually make, or maybe what I have to make for a specific order or for markets. And yeah, just to play around some. So I've seen a bunch of different people do different varieties of kind of like throwing something random. Maybe they throw something with some dice and have the dice, sorry, got my dog helper here. Maybe they throw some dice and it tells them, what they're gonna throw or what design they're gonna carve or something like that. And so I decided that I am going to do a game show, but not really a game show, just to spin the wheel. So welcome to the first episode of Spin the Wheel. I've made my wheel. If you're looking at this and you're thinking, it looks like it's made out of cardboard, that's because it is, because I'm not that fancy. But I made a wheel. So, and that goes with my wheel here. So, yeah, we've got numbers because I have a key for it. And so I'll spin twice. So the first spin is going to be how much weight I'm going to do. It's just going to be straight numbers. So 1 pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds. I'm in America. We use pounds. That's what we're doing. And then the second time I'll spin will tell me what I'm going to throw. So let's do our first spin. Okay, 6 pounds. We're starting big. I like it. Okay. Another 6. Okay, so that's a 6 pound planter. So, here we go. Okay, first we start by just weighing out that 6 pounds of clay, and then I do some spiral wedging on it. Just get it to a nice, even, uniform texture and try to get out as many air bubbles as I can and get the clay ready to throw. Ready to go on the wheel. Always starting with centering the clay. This clay was really soft, so it was perfect for working on a slightly bigger piece. Just start with that coning up and getting the clay nice and centered. You can see here that it's almost completely centered, but the bottom still had a little bit of a wobble at the very base of it. So I just compressed it a little bit more to get that full block of clay centered so that I really had something good to start with. there's a term that some people use when they're talking about a piece being centered, and they say that it gets quiet, and I feel like you can really see that happening here. So just starting by opening up the piece, setting a base. I did want to put a foot on this, so I put a little bit of a thicker base than I might have for something that didn't have a foot, but also not too thick because I want to have a drainage hole in there. So I want to make sure that I leave it thin enough to be able to cut those drainage holes once I get the piece entirely done. As I start the first pull, I use the sponge just to help give me a little bit more coverage than just my fingers, my fingertips would. And it also just helps me keep a little moisture on the piece without necessarily having to completely drench it in water. I just have a moist sponge, so it's slowly releasing a little water. So I compress the base to make sure that it's nice and even across the bottom. And then I go into my first pull. And as I do that, you really want to make sure that you try to keep the piece in sort of that volcano shape where it doesn't flare out too much at the top. But mostly you're just setting that initial height, and then you always want to compress the lip at the top of the piece after every pull that you do. And a lot of it's just about slow, controlled movements so that you're making sure you get even pressure on all parts of the piece as the wheel spins. As I do another pull, I'm just getting some additional height for this piece, but you want to make sure you don't get the walls too thin because you want them to be able to support the weight of the clay above it. So with the smaller piece, you might be able to get away with slightly thinner walls than you could with something, 4 or 5 pounds, or obviously much bigger. Then you need to keep those walls a little thicker as well to support the weight. So at this point I have the piece mostly to the shape and size that I want it to be. I decided I want it to be a pretty basic cylinder, maybe slightly wider at the top, but a pretty basic cylinder, and I'm gonna carve it, do some sgraffito on it. So now I'm just using a rib to kind of even up the sides, make it smoother on the edges, so that when I do carve it, it's a decent canvas to start with. There's actually like an air bubble on the side, so there's a little bit of a chunk out of one spot, but once it gets carved, it won't be that obvious. If it was a different type of piece, I might try to do something different with it, but for this one, because it's going to get carved, won't affect the piece at all in the end. Probably won't even be able to tell where it is once I've got the carving on it. I always try to remove excess clay from the bottom so that when I cut it off the wheel, I have a little bit of a notch for where that wire is going to go. And it's all done now. So I left it on the wheel spinning to help it speed up the drying process. And next up will be trimming and carving it. And I will definitely post a video about that later. Otherwise, come back next week to see what I make on Spin the Wheel.